So I need 5 volunteers, please. 5. Yes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Thank you. So I'm going to ask you to stand by the microphone. I'm going to ask you to stand on this side. And as you come, so you stand here. And you two. Stand on here. Pull them back. Stand behind. Come. And in a line. Now this way. So behind. Stand behind him. So he's going to face this way and a line behind him. Line up behind him. All right. I am a train. How do trains move? Like this, right? I am a train, and I'm moving towards these 3 people here. A nefarious criminal, mustachioed guy, has tied them up like damsels in distress, and I'm going to run them over. I'm a train, I can't stop. And I'm going to run them over. What's your name? Brooke? Brooke, aka, I don't know, Estefano. She has just happened to wander across this tragedy and notices that this microphone is the switch that changes tracks. Currently, it's this way. And if she changes it 90 degrees, I'm going to change tracks to the other person here, who is also tied up to the train. So I'm going, and I'm heading towards crushing these 3 people. If Estefano changes this switch, I'll be heading towards 1 person. So I'm going to go, and you guys tell Stefano what to do. Here we go. Choo, choo, choo. Choo, choo, choo. You pulled it? You pulled it? Oh no! I killed 1 person. Somebody died. Is she a murderer? Who says yes? Hands up high. High. Okay. And who says no? Interesting. About half and half. And who says not sure? Yeah, so about a third, and a third, and a third. What do you think, Stefano?
I still killed someone, but it could be considered like the greater good that I preserved more lives.
You preserved more lives. What about me as the train conductor? Am I culpable at all? Who says yes? Who says no? Who says yes again? 1, 2, 3. Okay. So still a couple people saying yes, most people saying no. If Stefano didn't show up, I would have killed those 3 people anyway. So did Stefano, those of you who said Stefano did a murder, if she didn't show up and those 3 people would have died, don't forget the mustachioed person. Let's say it was this gentleman sitting up front. He was the one who tied them up to begin with. Is he culpable at all now? Yes? No. Okay, so we all agree he's still culpable. So now that he's culpable, do you still think Stefano is culpable for changing the track? Yes? Interesting. No? Okay. Interesting. What do you guys think? Your lives were just saved by Stefano.
If I actually saved my life, I don't think she's a murderer.
You don't think she's a murderer? How about you?
I agree about the greater good thing. Even though she had to kill 1 person, she saved 3.
Interesting.
Why didn't you just stop the train?
Well, stopping the train takes several kilometers to do. I'm a big train. It takes a long time to stop. That's a fair question. Fair question. By stipulation, I can't stop the train. Yes?
Was there any way to get them off the track?
Oh, there were were tied down. He was a very crafty knotsman. Any other questions? Yes?
If she had chosen not to switch it, would that make her like responsible for killing those 3 people instead?
Let's ask the audience. If she had not touched the switch, would she have then been responsible for the murder of those 3? Hands up if you say yes. Hands up if you say no. So vast majority no, but still a few people saying yes. All right, thank you guys. And so that little experiment doesn't have much to do with our class today. I just wanted to wake you guys up. Our lecture today is on justice. Who has an idea of what justice is? Who has any idea of what justice is? Yes?
The absence of injustice?
That's one good way of putting it. Do you know what? Okay. Do you know what injustice is or justice? Quiet down, please. Yes? No? Anyone knows justice or injustice? Yes? It's the enforcement of law. That's a good answer. Anyone else? Yes?
Justice is the preservation of individual basic rights.
Preservation of basic rights. Pretty good. Anyone else? Yes? Fairness and equity. Pretty good also. You have hands up?
I'm just going to say injustice is the opposite, so it's the injustice is the opposite of I forgot what I was going to say.
That's fair. That's okay. Anyone else wants to share an idea about what justice is? So, people have been studying justice for a very long time, since at least Aristotle. The definition we're going to use is from a man named Justinian, and he was in the 6th century, I think, AD. But he said that justice is giving someone their due. He was writing in Latin, of course, at the time. This is a broad translation. But what does it mean to give someone their due? So that's pretty broad. Yes? Give them what they deserve. Yeah. You're giving someone what they deserve. That's an interesting question now. What do people deserve? What do you deserve?
What I earned.
What you earned? Okay. What do you deserve?
Isn't that like different for every person? Like when they say different things?
Let's try to keep it broad. So, or maybe you could say every person deserves different things. No two people deserve the same thing.
Unless they're doing the same thing, I guess.
Unless they're doing the same thing. Yes?
Would it be fairness like an eye for an eye?
Fairness and an eye for an eye, those are different conceptions of this statement. Yes?
Could be everyone has access to what they need to survive.
Access, what they earned, what they need. Yes?
What people's actions justify.
What people's are
Actions justify.
what their actions justify. What their actions justify. Justice is giving someone what their actions justify. Seems a little circular. Let's try again.
Closure.
Closure. What's closure?
So like let's say if like their family got murdered, like in court of law, like they might get closure from that person going to prison.
Is it something like psychological?
Yeah.
Okay. Someone else? So the definition I like for their due is what they deserve. But what do they deserve? It's what they are entitled to. And how do we determine entitlements? How do you know? Is this gentleman here, is he entitled to his laptop? Who says yes? That's a good answer from you. Who says no? Okay. What did he do to be entitled to this laptop that you're all so confident? Yes, sir. You bought it. That's pretty good. What if he found it on the street? Would he be entitled to it then? Anyone say no? You wouldn't be entitled to it? Okay, you. Why not?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, because it depends on who the original owner was.
Depends on who the original owner was.
Yeah.
How would you, why would that make a difference?
Well, because then you didn't earn it yourself specifically. If you just found it, you didn't put, you put the effort in to find it, but you didn't put the effort in to put the value on the materials. But it really depends on how you value materials.
Does anybody want to expand on this? Several of you had your hands up for no. Yes.
He didn't make the exchange of money or work to obtain the object.
So just if you don't exchange money or work for something, you're not entitled to it? Let's expand that. You get a present from Santa Claus. Did you exchange money or work for that thing? Yes.
It's not rightfully his.
Why not?
Because nobody gave it to him, saying this, I'm passing this to you, nor did he go and purchase it for himself.
So who does it belong to?
Whoever dropped it.
Whoever dropped it. So how would you, what would be justice in that situation? Whoever dropped it. What would be justice in that situation? Yes. Okay, how would you return it to the rightful owner? You just found it in an alley. What would you do? What would, yes?
It was dropped off with serial number, you can bring it back to the store and they can use it for the second fire.
Okay. So let's say we did that. We took the laptop serial number, took it to the store, and then they said, hey, looks like it was never registered. Now what? Or let's say it was registered to somebody named Eleanor, and the store tries to get in contact with Eleanor and they can't. What do we do? Somebody on this side. What do we do when we can't get in touch with Eleanor? Who does it belong to? Does it belong to the store? Does it belong to the person who found it? Does it belong to no one? Are we supposed to break it apart and give it away to use it for other purposes? What do we do? What do we actually do? If you find something and you make a good effort to find the owner, yes?
I think that if you made these people didn't work to find the owner and it didn't work out, then it would be well within his rights to keep it.
Yeah. You know what we call that? Finders keepers. Right? In the law, there's a famous expression, possession is 9/10 of the law. Have you all heard that? That means whoever is holding the thing, whoever is in possession of the thing, has the best claim to it. Unless the other 10th, someone can prove otherwise, that they came to possess that thing through illegitimate means. We talked about injustice. So if this is our definition of justice, giving someone their due, let's play a little logic game. What is then the definition of injustice? Injustice. Who can tell me what injustice is? What's the opposite of giving someone their due? Yes?
Not giving someone their due?
Not giving someone their due. Excellent. Injustice is not giving someone their due. once again, to determine injustice, we still have to figure out what their due is. What do they owe? What do they have common to? One way of determining due is through rights. We all talk about rights, human rights, property rights. What is a right? What is a right? You talk about it all the time. Several times you have people come up and said human rights as an answer to one of my questions. What is a human right? Yes?
Something that they deserve.
Something that they deserve, but we're trying to understand what desert is. So, yes?
Something that all humans are entitled to.
Something that they're entitled to? What though? What? Yeah, in the back.
Anything that preserves their life, liberty, and freedom.
Anything that preserves their life, liberty, or freedom. Why those three things? Yes?
It's their basic needs.
The basic needs. Life, liberty, and freedom are basic needs. What about air? That's a basic need. So we have a right to air. What if I choose to go swimming underwater? I go for a dive. Do I have the right? Yeah.
That's like choosing to participate in something where it's like not accessible.
So if I choose to do something where my right is not accessible, I no longer have that right?
Okay, so your point.
Yes.
Would you also be exerting your freedom of like going swimming?
Sure. Yeah. If I choose to go swimming, exercising choice is an exercise of freedom. When we say freedom, we mean freedom of choice. Yes.
Well, I think a factor that made you decide to go swimming would be that you know that your right to air isn't going to change, so you're going to come back up and still be able to breathe.
Do I have a right to air underwater? Yes?
Yes, you do, but you don't have access to it.
Ah. So I can have a right to something, but I don't have access to it. So what is it? Let's think about this. What does it mean to have a right to air? If I'm underwater, there's no air for me to breathe underwater. Or is there? Yes?
Having a right could mean that you don't necessarily have to put in the proportional amount of work to earn it. So like it's inherently yours.
So let's stick with this water example. How would you apply that to my underwater situation?
If you were to come up after you made the choice of going in water and not having access to means to breathe, then you don't have to like sign a contract or work while holding your breath before you can breathe. It's yours the moment that you're in the water and the moment that you breathe.
Let's take a step back. I think you guys are taking something for granted that you shouldn't. Is it truly impossible to breathe air underwater? See, shaking your heads. Why? Yes. Scuba equipment. We have scuba tanks. Right? So scuba tanks give me the ability to breathe underwater. Does that mean I have a right to scuba tanks? Yes.
No, I think that you have a right, so going underwater doesn't negate your inherent right to air, but you don't have a right to air while underwater.
Interesting. Anyone have another perspective? Yes.
If we take the original statement that everyone has a right to life, if a scuba tank is what's required for you to stay alive underwater, then you have a right to it. But if, say, you had the option to only stay underwater until you needed to come up for air, then you wouldn't have that right to a scuba tank because your right to air and to life is still available in another means.
Okay, we'll think about that. I saw a hand go up that way. No? Yes.
You have the right to come up whenever you want, so you're fine that way. But if somebody was to, like, say, hold you under the water, then they'd be taking away your right to air. And
Yeah,
not come up.
that sounds about right to me. That sounds like murder. But, attempted murder, at least. Yes.
I think only other people can take away your rights if you can't take away your own rights.
So I totally agree with that. But let's just figure out what is a right. So people can take away your rights. apparently. But we're still figuring out what a right is. Yes?
Things you are due without having to put in any skill work or just living experience.
Yeah. A right is something you're due just because you exist. Okay? But we still have the scuba example. If I have a right to air by my existence, I have a right to air, allegedly. Why do I or do I not have a right to scuba equipment? Let's go to the back then.
For scuba equipment, someone has to work to manufacture it.
Yeah.
Be doing work for your rights.
And why is that a problem?
Because everybody naturally gets rights.
Everybody,
Everybody gets their own rights just for existing.
yeah?
They don't have to do anything to get their right, I guess.
Yes?
It's not a natural right.
It's not a natural right. That's an interesting turn of phrase. Yes?
Maybe because you made the choice to go underwater. You could have stayed above water and just breathed air regularly, which is your right, but you made the choice to go scuba diving. So it's not that you didn't need to do that. It's something you made a choice to do.
So I made a choice. Yes?
You could say that you're not paying for the air in the scuba equipment, you're paying for the scuba equipment, and that's the property of someone else.
That's pretty good. So let's change the scuba equipment example. We're now talking about food. Everybody has a right to eat, right? Does that give me a right to go to, I don't know, Chez Felix, making that up, fancy French restaurant, and order, you know, whatever, a 12-ounce steak with all the fixings? Yes? Why is that? So I have the right to eat, but I have to pay for the services provided to me. But why? Why? So rights, you get rights by your existence. You also get rights through contract. Who here has any interest in finance? Who here's heard of what an option is, call? What is putting you on the spot, do you know what a call option is?
Sort of.
Okay,
I think,
there's a very specific phrase used in call options.
it's an investment that you make, and I think it's involved in a short, where if the market value of the stock hits a certain, either increases or decreases by a certain amount, then you make the purchase. Is that?
That's generally what an option is, yes. So a call option is when you expect the price to go up. So you buy an option, say a stock right now is $100. You buy a call option for when it goes up to $200. The option gives you, in the phrase of the law, it gives you a right, but not an obligation to buy at $200. Okay? So you can get rights by contract. So we have a distinction now between rights and obligations. You have an obligation. Obligation is not the same thing as a right. If you make a contract with someone, you're obligating yourself to fulfill that contract. There are some rights that we all have by our nature. Some people call them life, liberty, property, life, liberty, happiness, all this stuff. If you take a full, proper class in ethics, you'll discover what those are. But just know that there are some rights we assume everybody has. And an obligation is what someone else has to do for you. So if you and I make a contract for a call option, and you have the right to buy, I have the obligation to sell you when you exercise your rights. Any questions so far? No. So just because, yes, in the back.
So an obligation and a right can be obtained by a contract?
Yeah. But a right does not entail an obligation. Just because I have the right to buy a stock at a certain price does not mean I'm obligated to do so. Yes?
So when you said like, I have the right to purchase something, that means I'm obligated to sell it to you? No.
Ooh. Somebody is not always obligated to, so if you have the right to, here we go. Let's do some more logic. So we have, say you have the right to buy something. What would be the opposite of this statement? What is the opposite of this statement? You have the right to buy something. Yes?
You do not have the right to buy something?
You do not have the right to buy something. The opposite of this statement is not that you have the right to buy nothing, although you do, but that's a different thing. You have the right to buy something. The opposite would be you do not have the right to buy something. Just because you have the right to buy something, does that mean that somebody is obligated to sell you something? Yes?
No, it's kind of like no shoes, no shirt, no service. Just because you're there and you want to buy something, they don't have to sell it to you.
That's right. Just because you have the right to buy something does not mean somebody's obligated to sell you that thing. But they are obligated not to infringe on your right to buy something. That's a little complicated. I get it. So if you have questions about that, now's the time to answer. Yeah?
So then what, no shoes, no shirt, no service, or even like if you go like way back in like the civil rights and like refusing like service to anyone who's black, would that be then like, that was a legal infringement of your right? So like, is that not the same as like no shoes, no shirt, no service?
So with the civil rights situation before, have you all heard of Jim Crow laws? Shaking, nodding your heads, yes. The Jim Crow laws, were they laws when we talked about laws and legislation last week? Do you think they were laws or do you think they were legislation? Legislation. There was legislation known broadly under Jim Crow laws that prohibited racist mixing, doing these things. On that note, marriage licenses in the United States, they grew out of this racist belief of keeping the races segregated. So the state came in and said, if we leave the people up to their own accord, they'll start marrying other races. We can't have that. So now if you want to get married, you have to come to the state to get a license for marriage. Similar laws were placed for buses and water fountains and schools, etc. And then there was just this culture now bred where other things were being done. With the lunch counters, the situation is a bit more complicated. There actually wasn't, in every state, there wasn't a law that said that blacks had to sit separately from whites. But in those states where that had to be, where that was common, there were other laws that required the segregation of blacks and whites. So it was a complicated situation. Any questions? Yes?
I have a question. So say it's your
You gotta speak up.
Say it's your right to buy like an apple and the person says, no, I won't sell it to you. So what happens next? Like how would you exercise your right to buy that apple?
You could, so you have the right to buy an apple. Nobody has the obligation to sell you the apple. Okay? Somebody doesn't want to sell you the apple. You can persuade them otherwise. But we have legislation now that says you can't turn down customers, etc. But under a broad framework of just pure rights and only law, it's possible that you don't have the right to force someone to sell you something. Yes?
So you're only obligated to like help that person exercise their right to finance or something like that when a contract is signed?
Yeah.
Otherwise you both have the right to keep your own property and not exchange?
Yeah, generally yes. Generally yes. There's some legislation that affects that principle, but generally yes. Question? Yes?
Can you take away your own rights by acting foolishly?
Can you take away your own rights?
For example, like let's say you go into a restaurant, you want to order something, but you act like a maniac.
Right.
And because of because of the way the operation runs, they're like, we're refusing to serve you.
Yeah.
And so you're losing that right to gain food from that operation. You can go to another one, but that's one specific.
So you still have that right. The restaurant in that example is exercising their obligation or their own right of not serving you. Right? So the restaurant was not obligated to serve you, even though you have the right to get food. That particular restaurant does not have a particular obligation to serve you. They would like to serve you because you have money. But when you're acting foolishly, as you say, you might be scaring off other customers. So they might make the decision that because they're going to lose more money than making that transaction, then they're going to ask you to leave.
Like the train situation.
Like the train situation. Yes?
But in that case, would that eventually lead to rights being seen as commodities? Like if you like go out into public and make a public scene, you're disenfranchising other people from their rights to having like a happy, safe community. So you get your right taken away. So like is it like a that kind of situation?
So that goes back to justice. Justice is giving someone their due. And you determine dues through rights. And if you are not giving someone their due, and if they have a right of a peaceful exchange, or somebody's trying to exercise their right to eat, or to engage in contract, right? And you come in and you start acting foolishly, and you are infringing on their right to partake in contract, then you are not giving someone their due. You are committing injustice. So now justice is to give you your due. Yes?
And acting foolishly be viewed as like the different people though, like how I think I'm acting foolishly is not the same as like what another person would.
Yeah.
So like I'm protesting for my beliefs, but some people who disagree would say that you're imposing on their rights, but I think that I'm expressing my rights.
Yeah, but we deal with this on a case-by-case basis. If you go to a fancy French restaurant, burping and talking loudly might get you kicked out. If you maybe go to a McDonald's in downtown Toronto, that might be seen as normal behavior. Okay, let's move on. There are two ways of thinking about justice. We call this public justice and private. Public justice is how all of society is the justice we're trying to impose on all of society. It's the justice that the government tries to have in common for everyone. Going back to Justinian, he said it was whatever was going to help the Roman state. And the state back then was conceived as as a collective thing about everyone being involved. Private is just you and the individual. But it's difficult to transition from private to public, from individual. We have individual rights, and then we suddenly have a broad general right. When we say justice initially, we said it's giving someone their due. But in the public, who is the person giving someone their due? Let me ask you this. If the wind blows a rock down a mountain and it crushes some plants, is that justice or is that injustice? Who says it's justice? The wind blew down a hill. Blew a rock down a hill. Who says it's injustice that the wind blew a rock down a hill? Justice and injustice only apply to what people can do. Does that make sense? Only people can be just and unjust. So when it comes to public justice, sometimes called social justice in modern parlance, who is the person who is acting, who can be just or unjust? Does such a concept even make sense? We won't answer that today, but just something to think about. If it takes a person to do something in order for something to be considered just or unjust, then what does it mean for society to be just or unjust? Yes?
I was just wondering if you're thinking in terms of like a sort of law or like determining what's overall right or wrong, does one outweigh the other in terms of public versus private?
Courts of law typically tend to deal with the actions of individuals. Sometimes they will have one of the individuals on trial will be the state, but it won't be the entirety of the concept of the state. It'll be specific people responsible. Or sometimes, well, specific people will show up, right? If you are suing the government because you feel you were falsely imprisoned, does every single member of the government show up to courts? No. Specific people show up. And then if the government in that instance was found guilty of falsely imprisoning you, and the court rules that they owe you some money for compensation, does an individual person within that government lose money? Do they take money out of their own pocket, the head of the prison system, for example? No. It comes out of general funds from the government. Where do general funds from the government come from? Taxes and debt. Taxes are drawn from individuals within the society, and debt is also drawn from other individuals. So when the government does something wrong, at the end of the day, it's still individuals who are paying for it. Specific individuals, not all individuals. Again, not everybody pays taxes. If you have a low income, you don't pay taxes. If you have managed to game the tax code, you don't pay taxes. If you are an infant with no income, you don't pay taxes. So, justice always is doled out to individuals, and it only concerns individuals. Let's go back to rights. We talked about all sorts of rights today. The right to air, the right to eating, the right to contract, all these different sorts of rights. Where do they end? I'm going to make a suggestion that I'm not going to have much time to defend. But that suggestion is that all rights, any right you can think of, ultimately comes down to property rights. All rights are property rights. Human rights, welfare rights, natural rights, all of these come down to property. And just to be clear, your body is also property. Your body is property, your laptop is property, your desk is property, your shoes are property, your land is property, your condo in the sky is property. All rights are property rights. Let's make a really quick example. Let's go back to the example of air. If I have a property right, that means that my property right is in my own body, and I get to breathe air as I would like to. If I go into the ocean and for this example, let's say the ocean is unowned, my right, I don't get a magical right to air because of that. I still have the right to my body, and then because the ocean is unowned, I get to swim in it freely. The scuba equipment owner, they have the right to their property. They own the tanks, they own the store, they can exercise with their property to buy it, sell it, or gift it away. And through those rights of property, we then contract away property for property. I give my money, my property and money, to the scuba equipment owner in exchange for using their equipment for a few hours. All right? So that's something to think about. I'll see you guys on Friday.